Start, bench, cut these 3 Penn State running backs in college. Can you tell me who Penn State football is playing this weekend?
Sorry, what?
Welcome back into the Penn State Pulse. I'm your host, Dylan Dawson. Penn State now sits at 7-0 on the season after a resilient comeback win against Wisconsin up there in Madison. This Saturday, though, is the big one. It's a top 5 matchup in Beaver Stadium as number 3 Penn State plays host to number 4 Ohio State in what could be the game of the year in college football. It'll unfortunately be a noon kick. Thank you, Fox. The spread on this thing right now sits at Ohio State by 3.5 points. The elephant in the room, I'm going to get to this right away, is the Penn State quarterback situation, as Drew Allar suffered a lower body injury against Wisconsin that appeared to be something in his knee. It's not long term, but his status for this Saturday is questionable. If Drew can't go, it'll be redshirt sophomore backup Beau Pribula. Beau was able to come in and help save the day against Wisconsin last weekend. But Ohio State is obviously a different level of talent than Wisconsin and a different level of defense. I do think this is a winnable game with either QB in there. PSU would need a little more juice from their defense and special teams. We would need, especially that defense, to play 3-4 quarters instead of 2 of good football. But it is possible with Beau Pribula starting this game. The situation right here is a huge reason why you brought in Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas at offensive coordinator. AK dealt with starting QB Jalen Daniels missing most of the Jayhawks season last year and was still able to help them get to 9-4 while averaging nearly 35 points per game with backup QB Jason Bean at the helm. AK is creative and he builds the offensive game plan around the roster strengths on a week-to-week basis. He will go to what is working and will mask the weaknesses with the strengths. We saw just that against USC. When Tyler Warren collected 17 catches, it kept working, and AK just kept going back to the well for more. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So just for the record, my personal read on this thing is that Drew Allar will play. He will start this game. He'll be in some pain if the injury prediction of a grade 1 MCL sprain is correct, but he would be able to go at nearly 100%. If it is Drew, I think they'll try to have him get that ball out quickly and limit his need to run the ball because he will indeed be lacking mobility if he does play. If it isn't looking right or natural, though, I say don't drag it. Pull Drew Allar right away and put Beau in the game. The Buckeyes' one loss on the season is on the road by 1 point against now ranked number 1 Oregon. They don't really have any quality wins at this point in the season, but that would obviously change with a win on Saturday against Penn State. This is not quite the typical Ohio State team that we're used to seeing. Don't get me wrong, they have a ton of talent, a ton of depth on both sides of the ball, but there is certainly some holes in this roster, more so than usual in my opinion. Will Howard is the guy at quarterback. He has been great for them, but he is not the typical CJ Stroud or maybe Justin Fields caliber of player that we're used to seeing at that position in Columbus. The big weak point that has been identified on this team is the offensive line. They were struggling a bit this season to begin with for Ohio State standards, and then lost starting left tackle Josh Simmons, likely for the season, but certainly for this game. They put Zen Mikowski, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, in as the replacement, and he went down last Saturday against Nebraska. So he is questionable for this game, but Ryan Day just said today, which is Thursday, that he is unlikely to play this weekend. So the Buckeyes will likely be down to their third guy at the most important position on the offensive line at that left tackle spot. So this will be the type of game where every point matters, and I think a huge part of that will be how Penn State's defense responds to Ohio State's red zone drives. The Buckeyes have been one of the most efficient teams in the nation this season as far as scoring in the red zone goes. They have made 27 trips to the red zone this season and have scored on 27. 25 of those scores, this might even be more impressive, have been touchdowns. That PSU defense has shown a lot of bend but don't break mentality this year, with slowing teams down toward the end of their big drives. and that trend will be extremely important to continue this Saturday. Ohio State's offense is going to get their explosive plays. They're going to have some drives where they're down in that Penn State red zone. That is a given. But I really like the Nittany Lions' chances if they can hold the majority of those long Buckeye drives to 0 or 3-point results. Another part of that OSU offense that hasn't quite lived up to expectations is the run game. You better believe that Penn State will try to shut that down right away on Saturday. Similar to the Wisconsin game, if you can shut down the run early on and make the offense one-dimensional, it'll allow your elite pass rushers in Abdul Carter and hopefully tonight into Sutton to get in the quarterback's face and create havoc. We saw this exact scenario unfold against the Badgers when Hakeem Beamon was able to apply pressure on Braden Locke up the middle. This forced an errant pass from Locke that ended up in the hands of Jalen Reed, which ended up being the pick six, of course, and that was a play that shifted the entire course of that game in favor of the Nittany Lions. We all know Ohio State has an elite duo at running back in Trey Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and I'll get to them in a bit. Penn State needs to shut them down early. This is an essential to win this game. So let's jump into segment 2 with some Buckeyes to keep an eye on, starting with Will Howard at quarterback, of course. The fifth-year senior is a Kansas State transfer who grew up a little bit outside of Philly, so he's a PA guy, which is kind of funny with Drew Allar being from Ohio. Howard actually went to Downingtown West, which is the same high school as Penn State's starting left tackle Drew Shelton. Howard has posted nearly 1,800 yards so far through 7 games this season, as well as 17 touchdowns and just 4 picks. He has completed an impressive 74% of his passes as well. Howard also runs the ball quite a bit despite his large stature. He is averaging like 6 runs a game, I think, and he has scored 5 touchdowns on the ground thus far. So Penn State will definitely have to keep an eye on him taking off because he will beat you with his legs as well if given the opportunity, especially down around the goal line. Next up is that running back duo of Henderson and Judkins. They are the definition of home run hitters, both of them. Judkins has 520 yards and 6 touchdowns on the year, and Henderson has tallied 449 yards and 4 touchdowns of his own. Not so much for Trey, but Judkins has also been involved in the pass game a bit as well. If anyone tuned in may recognize that name, Quinshon Judkins, from somewhere but can't quite pinpoint it, it is probably because you watched him run all over Penn State last year in the Peach Bowl, dressed in an Ole Miss Rebels uniform. He had 120 total yards and a receiving touchdown, did Mr. Judkins in that Peach Bowl. So as I said earlier, the game plan for the Penn State defense will be to replicate what they were able to execute last weekend against Wisconsin, shut down the run early, especially the explosives, and force that offense to throw it on you. All right, now y'all knew we weren't going to get through this segment without this name being mentioned, and that is true freshman phenom wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. He has been nothing short of spectacular this season. You just simply don't see many people like him, even in D1 college football. I mean, he's like 18 years old. He's 6'3", 215, and runs a 4.4. He's posted 35 catches for 623 yards and 8 touchdowns on the season. And I'm pretty sure those 8 touchdowns are tied for the most in Power 4 college football. That's also 17.8 yards per catch, by the way. He is explosive. This teenager is wide receiver 1 on a team known as Wide Receiver U, and a team that churns guys at his position into the league on a yearly basis. It's just pretty crazy stuff. Emeka Egbuka also has to be mentioned here while we're on the topic of wide receivers. He's done some damage against Penn State in the past. He has 43 receptions on the year for 546 yards and 6 touchdowns. Egbuka is a great all-around receiver that kind of just does everything for them. He lines up in the slot and on the outside, and lots of those short, quick throws go his way. So a clear top 2 in that Ohio State wide receiver room of Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka to keep an eye on. Next up, all big Penn State football fans know this name. Some of you associate this name with some severe PTSD, and that name is defensive end JT Tuimoloau. He is the Buckeyes sack leader this season with 4, and he put up one of the top defensive performances we've ever seen against PSU in 2022. All right, here we go. 6 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and a touchdown. He also forced a pick from Sean Clifford. I believe he tipped it up, and can't think of the name right now. One of the defensive ends called it. Not much else to say here besides please block that man. Moving on to the Buckeyes' top tackler, linebacker and safety hybrid, Sonny Styles. He should probably be playing under Coach Poindexter here at Penn State because Dex loves his big safeties, and Mr. Styles is 6'4", 235 pounds. They do line him up in the box a bunch as well, though, which obviously translates to all these tackles. He actually may play more reps at linebacker than safety, but they do drop him into coverage a lot. He has 43 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, and a pass defense so far on the season. He's big, he's fast, he's physical. That'll be a player that the Nittany Lions absolutely have to game plan for. And then finally, for players to watch, I wanted to hit on linebacker Cody Simon. This is a player whose high school recruitment Penn State was also in on when he was coming out of St. Peter's Prep in New Jersey. He has posted 33 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 4 passes defensed, 1 sack, and a fumble recovery on the season. Just off of the top of my head, Curtis Jacobs is a guy that Simon reminds me a lot of. It's just a quick, easy comparison to make. They're both slightly undersized for a traditional linebacker, more of that modern, smaller linebacker that can efficiently defend both the run and the pass, quick enough to drop into coverage in a lot of those situations. So let's now jump into some predictions. All right, here we go. First up, the Ohio State Buckeyes are averaging 44.23 points per game in 2024, and that is including 31 points against the number 1 ranked Oregon Ducks. I think this is a statement game from Penn State's defense in particular, and they are able to cement themselves as the top defense in the Big Ten Conference. Penn State holds Ohio State to about half of their season average in points per game, with under 25. Next up, Penn State's slow starts have been an issue, not only this season, but against Ohio State in particular throughout recent history. That narrative changes this weekend. Give me the Penn State Nittany Lions cracking the scoreboard first on Saturday. And then finally, Jalen Reed came up huge against both USC and Wisconsin. He had the interception against USC to end the Trojans' possible game-winning drive late in that fourth quarter. Then he had the pick 6 in the third quarter against Wisco to fully shift momentum in that one. He might have actually had a second pick last weekend, which I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, later in the fourth quarter along the sideline, but they didn't even review it. I think he might have had a foot in. Regardless, though, Jalen is playing on an All-American level right now, and he's been even better as the competition has ramped up. So give me a third straight game with the pick for Jalen Reed, Penn State safety. All right, let's wrap this thing up now with my score prediction. You guys see the smile. I had us going 11-1 in the preseason with our only loss to Ohio State. This is another year of Penn State playing underdog against a more talented Ohio State team. Penn State isn't expected to beat this Ohio State team, 3.5-point dogs, but you know what? This is the year. Maybe it's the blue and white glasses I'm looking through, but I don't care. I've only gained confidence as the week has gone on. So with all of Happy Valley and Beaver Stadium behind them, the 2024 Penn State Nittany Lions will beat Ohio State 27-23. It's a field storming and total chaos in State College, and an undefeated regular season becomes a real possibility for the Nittany Lions. So that is going to do it for today's episode of the Penn State Pulse. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's get this thing done, and I'll see y'all after to break it all down.